What if someone told you that they felt like taking their life? What would you do? Or what if someone told you that they were hearing voices in their head? What would you do? We're going to have a discussion with Dr. Carlos Fayard, who is the Associate Director of Mental Health Affairs with the General Conference. He's also an Associate Professor of Psychiatry in the School of Medicine at Loma University. This is Voices, a production of the Atlantic Caribbean Union of Seventh-day Adventists. I'm your host, Barry Shane Saunders. Dr. Fayard, welcome to Voices.
Thank you.
Now, I've told the audience a little about where you work.
Yeah.
Tell us about Dr. Fayard, the person. Tell us about your family, where you work. Tell us about you.
Thank you, Barry. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been really fun to have a dialogue prior to the program with you. So I feel the warmth of the Bahamas and the warmth of the Caribbean through a conversation with you.
Thank you.
So what about me? I'm an Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Loma University School of Medicine. I am a clinical psychologist, so I'm not a medical doctor, but I work with physicians. And I've been happily married, blessed in my marriage for more than 40 years.
Oh, wow.
My wife is also, she's a medical doctor. She's a pediatrician, a professor of pediatrics, and the chair of the Division of Neonatology at Loma University. That is small babies. So she is absolutely amazing. And we have two children. Our son is soon going to be an epileptologist. So he finished medical school, went on to do his residency in neurology, and now he's finishing his specialty in epilepsy, and will be finishing in just a few months. And our daughter completed medical education as well, and was just accepted into the psychiatry program at Loma Linda. So we're blessed with our children, and I'm blessed with my wife. In terms of the work I do, so I chair the Religion and Psychiatry program at Loma Linda. So we have an emphasis in training mental health professionals to weave into the work they do with people, how people believe, what they practice around faith.
Wow.
Another thing I do is I'm the director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Community Mental Health and Training.
Wow.
If I can be a little proud about it. So we are the first WHO Collaborating Center for Mental Health in the U.S.
Wow. That's awesome.
And so this is part of what brought me here to discuss potential programs with the local WHO authorities here in Bahamas. And I also work with other faith communities.
Okay.
And it's been my privilege to be a consultant to the largest faith community in the area. They have recognized me for the work I've done. And so I'm very pleased to have been able to collaborate in a number of ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I can see that you're being a little humble. So I recognize from my research that you are Helping Hands honoree. And that means you've been recognized for the work that you've done by some of your patients.
That is correct.
And for that, we congratulate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So let's get right into our program. We're talking about mental health.
Yes.
And for a while, just like disability, we were not paying particular attention to these things in our churches. Before we get into that discussion, tell us what mental health encompasses as a professional.
Yeah, mental health basically is the ability to live your life to the fullest, the capacity to love and to work. And that is predicated on the ability to think clearly, to feel freely, to be able to behave responsibly, to be able to perceive reality accurately. And so all of that encompasses what is the ideal for mental health.
Right. When we look at mental health from a church perspective, how are we doing?
Well, I think that there is room for improvement.
Okay.
The church has a philosophy that is unique. We're probably one of the very few, if not the only, community of faith that affirms that we are whole persons,
Right.
that mind, body, spirit, our social environment, those are indivisible, cannot be separated.
Right.
So it is embedded in our theology that we believe that psychological issues, mental health issues are part of being human.
Right.
So here we are, our psychologists are working, you're using your mind to ask me questions, I'm trying to answer, and so it happens naturally that it happens everywhere. Now, when it comes to how we have brought that into the ministry of the church, we have lagged behind.
Right.
There's a quote from Ellen White in Ministry of Healing from the year 1905 that says the condition of the mind has much more to do with illnesses than is believed. And then she goes on to say that depression has a significant impact on illness. And that is being borne out, by the way, by research. There's hardly any medical condition where depression doesn't play a role. And the role it plays magnifies all the consequences associated with that medical condition. Right. And so she's very clear in indicating that depression, guilt, shame, and so on contribute to undermining vital forces. On the other hand, she also says that faith, hope, love, courage are protective factors for health in general and for mental health in particular. So we have been sitting on this absolutely stunning truth for more than 100 years.
That's right.
And as it happens with human beings, we've been slow in finding a way to harvest the blessings that are being provided by the revelation that God has bestowed upon our church. Right. So from what we believe to what we do, there is a distance, there is a gap, and thank God I think we're coming to a place in which that is more widely recognized, although many challenges remain ahead.
Well, as you were speaking just now, I thought about Jesus' ministry.
Yeah.
And the Bible said he went about healing every illness.
Yes.
And it was not only the physical maladies,
right.
It was also the mental.
Yeah.
Should this critical fact be a focus in our church today?
It should, for a number of reasons. So one of the factors associated with our churches at their best are about providing our communities around us and within us as shelters of protection, a shelter from all the influences the world is bringing about, a place of healing.
Right.
So this is what we ought to be at best. Now, we also know that, for instance, depression is about to become the second leading cause of disability worldwide.
That's
so
right.
First one is cardiovascular diseases. Depression is going to be the second one. So the needs of the communities are huge. And therefore, we, as Seventh-day Adventists, are consistently looking for opportunities to be involved with our communities in a positive way, to make an impact on our communities. And so there is a rising need to address mental health, and therefore is a wonderful, unique opportunity for our community, for our church, to be able to assist the community and also let the community know that we're there for them and that we can also provide shelter for them when they join us.
I like that direction, right? But just let's look at it from a realistic perspective. The church I worship at, it's in the more depressed community. And every so often there will be someone with some mental disability walk into church. They'll stand up, they'll look around, they will never be. How should I, from a lay perspective, approach such an individual, knowing that that person is just as much in need of the grace of God as the rest of us who appear to be in our sane minds?
You're absolutely right. The church actually, this last year, a year before, has developed a whole ministry dedicated to people with special needs.
Right.
And so now the church is developing resources to be able to assist individuals with special needs in psychiatric terms, as also in other ways as well.
Beautiful.
So let me answer your question in a slightly different way. So we tend to associate mental health with the people that stand up,
That's right.
look different,
Yeah, that's right.
act differently,
That's right.
and so they are not the kind of people that we feel attracted to, you know. But mental health, people with emotional distress cover a wide range
That's
of
right.
situations. In fact, to your church, very likely because these conditions are invisible.
Right.
You will have people that come to your church are suffering from a number of things. They've been traumatized, they've been oppressed, they've been, hurt in different ways,
Right.
and you will not know it.
That's
Because they
right.
sit on the side, they sit on the pews quietly, they pray and they sing, so you would never know they're suffering.
That's right.
And yet we focus on the people that sort of stand out because of their behavior.
Right.
And so in a way that speaks a little bit to the problem that we have, not just we as a church, but
Right.
community at large, as to how we address the needs of people with serious mental illness,
Right.
which, by the way, represent the smallest number of people needing mental health services.
That's right.
So it doesn't, of course, take away from the fact that people need to do what they need to do. So I remember many times at church, someone stands up and starts, shouting things. Well, the ushers run instead of, try to restore the calm to it. And let me give you an example. I was in the Dominican Republic last year, and I was doing a lecture similar to what I was doing here in the Bahamas. And at the end of it, I was brought out by a group of people from one church. And a woman that was there, she started telling me that she has this disorder called manic depressive disorder,
Right,
which
right.
is one of the serious mental illness.
Right.
And so this group of people were trying to be helpful to her, but I could see they were weary because she just was difficult,
Right.
And so I talked to her very directly. I said, you're under treatment. And she said, yes. Are you taking your medication? She said, no. I said, do you have your medications? She said, yes. I looked at him. I said, my sister, you need to take your medications. You're going to burn out these good people around you. And I said to them, the best way you can help her is to see that indeed she follows through with the treatment that she needs. So back to your question. Potentially the best way to approach a person in that situation is to see that indeed is assisted in finding the kind of help that in the long run would have a highest probability of restoring that person to be able to be a productive member of society.
Beautiful, beautiful. We often hear about this statement that says, there is no health without mental health.
Yes.
There's no health without mental health.
All right.
Unfold that for us.
Well, the World Health Organization has adopted this phrase, and that becomes a crying, word from the World Health Organization that wants to call attention to the significance of mental health. Now, the World Health Organization, as you know, is a community of nations, and basically what they care about is budgets. So they say, what is it that costs us the most?
Right.
So let's go for that,
Right.
so that we increase well-being, but also we reduce the draining
Right.
of resources that goes for that. And because mental health issues have become such a significant portion of the cost to society, then the World Health Organization has decided to highlight that, not only as because there's a need for it, but also because there is a very practical implication from that.
Right.
Let me give you just one example. So diabetes in the United States cost the government that pays for the health coverage around $6,000 for the treatment in a year.
Wow.
Okay? Now, if someone has a co-occurring depression, the cost doubles.
Wow.
So it goes to close to $12,000. So there's a practical implication there. Now, let me just move it a little bit to our own Adventist traditions. So we say, I have incorporated that because we say there is no health without mental health, because it is absolutely grounded, anchored in our belief of holistic health.
Right.
So when we say, that our spirit hurts, of course our mind is going to hurt. Very likely we'll have medical conditions too.
right.
So, Ellen White says that the mind and the body sympathize with one another.
That's right.
Not because they're separate, but because when they work well, it's like a symphony in which you have all the sounds coming perfectly.
And you get this holistic.
And you have that holistic thing. And when one of these parts is just out of sync, the others are going to also suffer.
That's right.
And therefore, there's not going to be health when there is someone with any kind of condition that, for instance, is also suffering from depression.
Right. We are already at a break. But when we come back, I want us to talk about the church specifically. How are we addressing the stigma attached to mental health? And what can we do to mitigate against that? And what can we as regular members do to help these members in our church that may be having these challenges?
Beautiful. Let's do that.
You're watching Voices. We'll be right back.
We are people, and we love to get connected. We connect as families because of birth. We connect as friends because we click. And we connect as communities because we care. Seventh-day Adventists are people who connect in communities called congregations, which in turn connect to form conferences, who connect together to form unions, divisions, and the General Conference. Why do we connect? It starts with a connection to the Creator, who invites us on a spiritual journey. When we journey together, we can help each other along the way. This journey is a journey of a lifetime, and as we learn and grow, life becomes filled with meaning and purpose. Our greatest joy is in helping others along the way. Wherever you are on your journey, we believe that we have something to offer that can make your life more whole. So the next time you see a Seventh-day Adventist, remember, you're not looking at someone who stands alone. They are connected to a world church that has 18 million members, gathered in 13 divisions, comprised of 122 unions, formed by 600 conferences, serving in 140,000 congregations in 208 countries, who worship in 924 languages, and they all want to connect with you.
Hello and welcome back to Voices. For those of you just joining us, we have in studio with us Dr. Callas. Dr. Callas, before we took the break, we said that we would segue a little more into the church, some of the issues, the mental health issues affecting the church, and how can we as laypersons, how can we assist our members or even those coming in from the community, how can we be more sensitive to them?
Yes. Well, I think that, you mentioned before going on the break, what can we do with stigma? And I think that the best thing what we can do is education.
Beautiful.
And there are many ways in which our church can be educated. First, reading our Bible well.
Yes.
Because I think that sometimes we read the Bible in a way that it tends to minimize what it teaches about mental health.
Right. We just look at it as a good storybook.
Exactly. Or there, this is doctrine or beliefs.
Oh, yes.
But for instance, one of the best ways of dealing with one of the massive problems in society nowadays, which is worrying and anxiety, can be found in the Sermon on the Mount.
That's right.
So Matthew chapter 6, at the very end, it gives 5 principles to deal with worrying. And Jesus says, do not worry.
Yeah,
Now,
that's right.
who worries? You tell them, don't worry, and people are saying, oh, what am I thinking, right?
Right.
People worry anyway. But Jesus goes on to give what I believe are 5 principles. One, Jesus says, observe nature. Look at the lilies on the field.
That's
Look
right.
at the birds. And the way of looking is an intense observation that is focused on the beauty and that also connects to the Creator. So that's principle number 1. The second is, don't you know that I care for you?
Yeah, I have this.
And right. And so the trust is not just a belief, but an experience of trust.
That's right.
So that's a second principle. The third one is that Jesus says, you're going to worry anyway, because he says, worry, just for today, right? So don't take your worries to the next day.
That's right.
And so, part of what we use is that we say, for people that worry a lot, we say, dedicate a time in the day, like half an hour, and whenever a worry comes up, save it for 5 o'clock when you're going to concentrate on your worries.
Okay.
So that contains the worrying, because the brain says, oh, okay, I don't have to be concerning with that all the time, because I will have a time to be consumed with that. Yeah. So we don't need to take our worries to the next day. The fourth principle that Jesus teaches is what science also teaches, is to, examine our thoughts. Right. Jesus said, who by worrying will add 1 hour to their life.
That's right.
So obviously Jesus is saying, this is a thought that it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's right.
Think it through. So that's the fourth principle. And the fifth principle is to live a life in which values line up with the kingdom of God. Mm-hmm. So these are the 5 principles. So back to your question. First, let's read our Bible well. Right. And not in a way that tends to minimize or to see things where they're not. Right. So another thing that we do, as I said, is education. A very important part in the education when it comes to mental health is to understand 3 things. One, the issue of stigma. Stigma is associated with this person coming to church you described before.
Right.
In that people tend to think, mental health is only for the crazies, quote unquote. Right. And the reality is that it's far more than that, unfortunately, and affects the lives of many in different ways. So it is not that just for the people with serious mental illness. Mm-hmm. People suffer from emotional conditions of all kinds, and therefore they would not show up in that way, and yet they suffer, and it's important that we reach out to them. Another thing that education needs to do is to help people understand that many of the mental health conditions, for instance depression, tend to have a course that ebbs and flows. So that, we tend to focus on one-day events, so we do health expos, 5 days to cook, 5 days to smoke, or to stop smoking, rather. And these are things that take a longer time to do. Right. And the third problem is that we, quote, spiritualize emotional issues. My brother, just pray about it.
Yes.
Go to your Bible and so on. Now, completely I agree with the statement, pray and go to your scriptures and go to church and meditate and so on and so forth. But to say to someone with serious depression that is the same as saying someone with diabetes, just pray about it.
Just pray about it. Don't take your insulin, just pray about it.
Just pray about it. And we believe in holistic ministry. Holistic means everything.
Yes.
It means that we're not just sectioning off, these to be treated in a way that is different from the way we treat other conditions, because it just isn't. And the science is very clear as to what happens in the brain when, for instance, people have been traumatized. So these are the 3 things that are very important for the church to be educated about, to be able to understand the nature of mental health, the nature of emotional distress, and what we can do about it.
Right. And I like the fact that you went there. When we talk about the power of prayer, sometimes people tend to feel that prayer answers everything. There's nothing wrong, because it does. Yeah. But that prayer may be through somebody else or through a professional. How do we get our people to understand that the professional, that God has empowered and given the professional the knowledge to assist, so that prayer, the professional might be the answer to the prayer?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and the answer really, in a sense, it depends, right? Because every person has a different perspective as to why they would just feel that would not be right, But let me just say this, suffering comes in many ways, in many forms, in many shapes. It is important to know that Jesus came to heal those that were suffering. If you go to Ministry of Healing, for instance, he came to bring up the downcast.
That's right.
So he cast demons, he healed all kinds of things. But consistently, you can see how Jesus addressed the emotional needs of those that were surrounding him. Jesus also quoted Isaiah chapter 61. And in Isaiah chapter 61, it says, I've come to anoint you so that you set the poor free and the people in prison free. And that, those that have covered with ashes, they have joy and garments of joy and so on and so forth. So if you read carefully portions of Isaiah chapter 61, it speaks very clearly of God's, our Lord's interest in reaching out to those that mourn in Zion. That's exactly what it says. So shame is the enemy of truth.
That's right.
If you read in the book of Genesis, the first manifestation of sin was shame.
That's right.
They said, "Oh, we don't look good. Let's go hide." Before anything else.
And the shame
came over. So the first manifestation of the presence of a broken world was of a psychological nature. So what I'd like to say to people is, of course, it's important that you look for help with those that you can trust, with those that are qualified to do it, that you never ever leave your God or your prayer or your Bible or your church behind, because they will be important and essential to any kind of recovering from illness. And again, think about what we believe. We believe in wholeness, and therefore it just flows from the way we believe that attending to the emotional distress of people is very important. People that don't get help not only continue to suffer, but the families suffer, their income suffers, and therefore is something that clearly brings no benefit to anyone, and certainly no glory to the maker of all the means to bring healing about to humanity.
Beautiful. So we depend on the professional, but we do not negate the power of prayer.
No, absolutely not. And we never depend on the professional. We depend on prayer, on the Word of God, on Jesus, and we seek help from people that are equipped to provide assistance. Yes.
Just let's shift slightly.
Yeah.
We have a lot of persons in our churches, and it seems like the prevalence of mental illness it's growing for probably societal reasons, but we are not only talking about dissociative disorders and the like. We're talking about dementia and all those stuff. How do we train our people to relate to these people when they come into our churches? How do we embrace them? Because in the biblical model, everybody used to ring a bell, unclean, unclean. But we've been educated now. How do we teach our people to relate to these people in a loving, godly way?
Yeah, I think that there are some basic elements that actually were taught last Tuesday, and we've developed resources for the local church to reach out to the community in responding to emotional health needs, resources for pastors to be better equipped, to recognize and to help and to refer when needed, and also a set of skills that are helping skills. And actually we spent Tuesday all day teaching those skills. And those are available. So, we'd love to come back to the union.
We'd love that. We'd love that, because
we can help, we can train everyone that is interested.
And it's important to train the health professionals, because we have a health ministry. The church was deliberate in the ministries to reach the different needs. And we just have to make sure that that trickles down to the local church and the lay persons, because you have the health professionals, you have the elders, and I think all of us have to be equipped to meet some kind of a need in church.
Absolutely. I think that is so true, So without going into how programs are developed and whether or not they're implemented and whether or not they reach the intended audience, which is the people in the pews, let me just give you an example of the power of engaged people that are not formally trained. So you know that suicide is a very grave societal problem. So every 40 seconds, somewhere in the world, is taking their lives.
Wow.
So we've been talking now for 20 minutes. So just multiply, and you've had this many people that somewhere in the world have committed
Taken their own
suicide.
lives.
Now, I went to the launching of the suicide prevention program by the World Health Organization in Geneva in 2014. And one of the presenters was a psychiatrist from India. Now, one of the problems that many countries have around the world is that there is a great need, but very few people that are available to meet the need. And so the World Health Organization has developed ways of engaging non-professionals in addressing mental health issues. So in India, a lay person, meaning that is not
trained
really just a
professional.
trained professional, went to visit once a month people that had been discharged for a suicide-related episode. So be that they were thinking to commit suicide, be that they tried to commit suicide and didn't succeed. So they were back in the community. And so this lay person would visit them once a month, just once a month. And the suicide rate was cut in half.
Wow.
So there's power that comes from someone that simply is committed, that has good common sense, that has the ability to empathize, it has the ability to understand things. And of course, in that situation, it's not like this person is just thrown to the wolves, works in connection with others in case there is a need for additional help, but it's the power that we have as people without necessarily having to rely on any specialized knowledge can be incredible. And so I pray for the time in which our church would see that indeed we not only can be better, but we be more happy, we're more fulfilled when we embrace the possibilities that are offered in meeting the needs of our humanities around us.
And then all of us become healthy.
Indeed, absolutely.
Thank you.
A healthier community.
That's right. Dr. Carlos, we are fresh out of time. But we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and share with us. And we have to have you back in the studio again because there's so many other things we could discuss.
Let's make that a prayer. So
Thank you. Thank you, and we look forward to you
Thank
coming
you so
again.
much, Ray. Thank you.
As we become more aware of the prevalence of mental health issues in our society and in our churches, it's incumbent on us to equip ourselves so that we could face these challenges. You've been watching Voices. Tune in again next time.